Hi, it's Dave. I'm the lead designer for Jovian Wars with DreamPod 9. I'm going to explain very quickly how you deploy in this game. I'm going to use some models just to represent very quickly. So, at the start of the game, the player who deploys first is going to be the player with the most models. In this case, it's almost always Sega. Sega seems to prefer quantity over quality, and in this case, they're going to start by deploying one of their ships, a Hachimen destroyer, and whenever you deploy a capital ship, you get to deploy up to 2 exo armor or fighter models within 1 inch of it. Now, this does not show a whole table, this is just for representation purposes. In the first player's deployment phase, you'd also place one of an enemy model. This represents the models which have just met each other in space and are about to have an engagement. They would also get to place 2 of these exo armors or fighters. Then the play would continue. The first player, the Sega player, would be deploying, would have deployed their models and would now move and fight with those models. Then the Jovian player, over here in the blue, would move and fight with their models. Then they're both done their turn. The second turn arrives. The Sega player plays again. The Sega player would now get to roll. And when they roll, they have to roll the skill. Now, most skill on most Sega models is 2. So if they can roll a double, they can bring in another capital ship, and that capital ship can bring in a couple of more exos. And then they can continue to roll for any exos which they didn't manage to bring in using their capital ship. And if they roll well, they can bring in extra models. Then when it becomes the Jovian player's turn, they get to roll for their models. So they get to bring in another ship and more models along with that. In the next phase, the Jovian player would bring in all their remaining models that were not brought in a previous turn. And then in the third round, the Jovian player would bring in any models that they had still remaining off the board in reserve. There's an interesting strategy here, where if a player chooses to, they can choose not to deploy exo armor or fighter models, and instead hold them back in reserve and launch them at a later time. In this case, it could be strategic for the Vindicator model here to actually remain off the table in reserves and be brought in to do a strike later on.